Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. We are in chapter 42. This is 42b. So before we begin, first let us give praise to God. Hallelujah, Adonai, kol goim shabachu kol haomim, ki gavar aleinu chasdo be'emet Adonai l'olam. Hallelujah. And all the study, this Torah study, all its benefits, everything goes towards the protection of the soldiers. So this one was called The Way of Water. No, I didn't see it, but I wouldn't either. You don't compromise good storytelling for VFX. Anyway, this one is called The Way of Water, the real way of water. So we pick up right where we left off last week. As Israel were right by the sea, we just read the Parsha of the crossing of the sea this past Shabbat, and Egypt was closing in on them. God told Michael, the archangel, to become a wall of black fire, and it held the Egyptians at bay for a time. In other words, as long as it needed to. So let's continue. And the heavenlies saw the turmoil that Israel were in all night, and they did not sing praise and worship to their Creator. You see, the angels have shifts for singing praise and worship. In turn, down here, the Levites do what the angels do, but in the temple. But now they didn't. How could that be? If you want to say that they didn't have free will, then this would never be, no matter what was going on down here. But they do have free will, and what they chose to do is praise God 24/7 because they are the creation and He's the creator. In other words, what else are you going to do except for being grateful for the fact that you were created? They get it. We still don't. Certain of our tzaddikim understood this. This is why David was on one of the very top over there, hence the book of Psalms. They are more aware than we can ever be in this earthly form and of this of the infinite, that there's nothing better that they can do than show gratitude to He who spoke and the world became into existence. We, people, on the other hand, have more to do, as we have commandments to fulfill, in addition to the song and praise we give God throughout the day. So, the heavenlies missed their cue. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit stuffy. So the heavenlies missed their cue. But how could it be that they did not sing, again, when it was their time to sing? They must have had to have been sincerely distracted, worried maybe, if that is the case. What do we learn? God created all of reality for the sake of Israel. And so if Israel are destroyed, everything ceases to exist, including the angels, which is why they were worried as they saw that if God didn't place Michael where He did, Israel would have been wiped out. And it is like this all night, as our text says. Because the angels knew that Egypt did have to drown, they did know that they had to drown, but their time was only in the morning. So what are we going to do? We're going to hold them off all night? Apparently so. So all night, they are watching the scenario that everything in the universe is riding upon. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moses, "Stretch forth your hand over the sea and split it," as said in Exodus 14:16. So Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, but it did not agree to split. This is some deep stuff, pun intended. So what does it mean if God sent Moses to split the sea? Moses did what God said, but the sea did not split because it didn't agree to do so? Right? Okay. How ancient is the sea? The great waters of the deep. We're going to go back to Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2 for that. At first, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was astonishingly empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. Before God created the light on day one, there was water. Before God created the angels, there was water. There was chaos, darkness, the abyss, the Spirit of God, and the water. And by the way, the darkness of the abyss, that's Gehenna, that's hell. But you do not mess with water. Water is ancient. As we've learned, There was only one body of water in the beginning, but God split the water and it became the waters. God then separated them and said in Genesis 1:6, and God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the water. Boom, separation. And let it be a separation between water and water. You ever see, actually, oddly enough, another James Cameron movie, The Abyss, one of his best, where the guy, I think it was Ed Harris, he's like underwater and he's choking, right? And if you haven't seen it, it came out in the 80s, then I'm sorry for ruining for you. The underwater aliens, they created a vacuum. In other words, they actually separated the water from the water, creating an expanse over there for him to breathe. Exactly like that. Good stuff for back in the day, even for today. And the water down here, that remained down here, was weeping that it had been separated from its creator, to the point where its tears caused the ocean to be filled with salt. As a result of the sacrifice of the lower waters, we are commanded to have salt upon the altar, in the tabernacle and in the temple, as well as at our altar at home, our table where we eat at all times. There must always be salt on your table at all times. Remember, this is your altar. And water, like all of creation, but especially a creation that is so ancient, is very protective of God and his Torah, just like the sun, the moon, the earth, the air, fire, and of course the ministering angels who govern. So Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, but it did not agree to split. Now our sages discuss this topic according to each element our text is about to present. And they also say that if God told Moses to do so and the sea would split, there's no way that the sea would defy if the sea wouldn't split, there's no way that the sea could defy God's command, right? Even if it had been done through Moses. But rather, the sea did move, but not enough. Every time, just a little bit more, right? Lehavdil, to make a difference. This is like the parents telling the kids to listen to the babysitter and do everything the babysitter says, right? The kids don't want to listen to the babysitter, but they know that they have no choice, so they take their time basically protesting, right? Or if you tell your dog, come on, no, come on, come in, just begrudgingly moving along. So this is the case of the sea over here. Moses stretched forth his hand. The sea began to rumble, but it did not split. Moses showed the sea his covenant. That's right, the Brit, the circumcision. The sea rumbled and swayed a bit more, but it did not split. This instance is not uncommon throughout ancient times, specifically in the Torah, and obviously only relevant to Israel, right? Joseph showed his Brit to his brothers to prove who he was, and that he remained righteous as they could see with their spiritual eyes the name of God written upon his Brit. Clean eyes see holy things, and vice versa. Unclean eyes see unclean things. Jonah showed his Brit to Leviathan. We learned about this too, thereby saving the big fish that was taking him for a ride, showing him the wonders of the deep. Daniel showed his Brit to shut the lions' mouths when he was tossed in their den. These things are no joke. The chet habrit, the transgression of the Brit, is a very, very big thing. It's the difference between being a tzaddik or not, being a righteous person or not. And anyone who abuses their Brit instead of the name of God, that can only be seen by a perfect righteous person, would have an unholy name of impurity on there. One of the opinions is that the name there is the name of the serpent. Because this all goes back to the Brit in the Garden of Eden, as we studied in one of the earlier classes of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Moses showed the sea, the coffin of Joseph. And the sea rumbled and gashed even more, but it did not split. This we can understand from the original text, as we know that Moses personally carried out the massive lead coffin of Joseph from Egypt, and he was holding it until they stood by the sea. So when we read in Exodus 14:16, and you raise your staff and stretch forth your hand over the sea and split it, when Moses stretched out his hand, it was to present the bones of Joseph. Staff, bones of Joseph. He held them like a massive coffin in one arm. Please do not suspend your disbelief around this technicality, okay? We're talking about the splitting of the sea. Moses could carry a massive coffin with one hand. And the sea still did not split, And Moses showed the staff upon which is the explicit name of God, and it did not receive the command. Now, how is that possible, right? Because we know that the staff was made from the same material that came from beneath the throne of God. So our sages say that the sea knew that Moses would use the staff to hit the rock later, twice, in order to receive water, in order to try and command water, instead of speaking to it once as God has commanded him in Numbers 20:11. Moses raised his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, when an abundance of water gushed forth, and the congregation and their livestock drank, right? To which God responded, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, since you did not have faith in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly to the land which I have given them. As we have learned, this is not the reason why Moses did not enter into the land, but rather this was a gotcha moment as a reason to glorify God's name, which everybody was fine with, right? Moses already knew he wasn't entering the land before he even was sent to Pharaoh in Egypt. And what was this place and instance called? These are called the waters of dispute. Hema me meriva. Meriva comes from the word lariv, to fight, to quarrel. Me, maim, the waters of dispute. The water knew, the waters knew, and the water will defend the honor of its creator. And Moses returned to the Holy One, blessed be he, and said, Master of all the worlds, the sea does not listen to me. The Radal says that Moses approached God not out of anger or frustration that the sea didn't listen to him. That wasn't one of those, do you know who I am? Do you know who I work for moments? Okay, when Moses returned to God. God had established, and we have it in writing, that Moses was the most loyal of servants, the humblest of men, the greatest of all the prophets. These are according to the words of God. So there's no argument here. So it's not that you're questioning the character of the man. So you had better believe that, especially in a moment like this, he had no pride in him, which he did not. And so when he returned to God, he said so from a place of great humility, that the sea would not heed his voice, though he did what the Lord had commanded him to do. Exactly like he told God in Exodus 4:1, our sages bring this comparison. Exodus 4:1, when he didn't want to be sent to Egypt, Moses answered and said, Behold, they will not believe me, and they will not heed my voice. God, that the water is not heeding my voice, right? But they will say the Lord has not appeared to you, right? Not because Israel wouldn't listen to God, or Pharaoh wouldn't listen to God, or that the sea wouldn't listen to God. He never saw God as the issue, but rather he was so humble that he saw himself as the issue. Like we said, Moses' particular characteristic was to look at every single one of Bnei Israel, every last one of them, and say and understand, he knows that the powers that he received was all from God and none from himself. And so he said, if God didn't give me these powers, I wouldn't be better than anybody else. In fact, this person would be a better Moses than me, and this person would be a better Moses than me. He looked for all the characteristics of all of Israel, every last one. He said they would all be a better Moses than me, right? That's why he was chosen. The one that doesn't want it always needs to be chosen. Genuinely doesn't want it. And God chose him directly, so nobody's fooling anybody over here. Let's think about it. Even, we could say like the trees are ancient as well, right? The trees, they got a network. They go all around the world. They breathe, they feel, they move. They can, they give life and they can kill, but they still need to be sustained by water. What sustains water though? Water is just water, right? Okay. Anyway, so immediately after all this happened, Moses comes to God. Immediately the presence of the Holy One, blessed be he, appeared upon the sea. David speaks of this in Psalms 106:9. And he rebuked the sea of reeds, and it dried up, and he led them in depths as in a desert. So God had to rebuke, vaigal, he growled. This is the same word as when Jacob growled at Joseph when he was giving the second dream to try and calm down the brothers, to show that his disapproval. Vaigal, ligo. God rebuked the sea. Why? Because it didn't do what he told Moses to tell it to do. So the word vayecharev, Vayigal bayam suf vayicherav. And it said dried up, but it doesn't mean dried up, it means destroyed, like Hal Cholev, like the Mount of Destruction. We had a teaching about this a few weeks ago. Although if you would describe the destruction of the sea, that would literally be drying up, right? What is the opposite of wet? Dry. The opposite of the sea, that's the desert. The very opposite, okay? And the sea fled. This, of course, we can read in Psalms 114. When Israel left Egypt, the house of Jacob left a people of strange tongue. Judah became his holy nation. And we'll discuss that in the coming teachings, where Judah fits in over here, even before we saw any kind of Judah work. Judah became his holy nation, Israel his dominion. The sea saw and fled. Hayam ra'ah vayanos, lanus, he fled. The Jordan turned backwards, the mountains danced like rams, hills like young sheep. What frightens you, O sea, that you flee, or Jordan, that you turn back? You mountains, that you dance like rams, you hills like young sheep. From before the Master, who created the earth, from before the God of Jacob, right? Who transforms the rock into a pond of water, the flint into a fountain of water. He makes opposites over here. He could do what he wants. He's the master of the universe. And the waters became unsettled and began to crash, and were stricken and shaken, trembled and quaked, and descended to the depths. When the presence of God chooses to be revealed, there is nothing that can stand in its way. As said in Psalm 77:17, the waters perceived you, O God. The waters perceived you, they trembled, even the depths quaked. Ra'ucha maim Elohim, ra'ucha maim yachilu af irgezu tehomot. Ra'ucha, the waters saw you. And the sea wasn't the only element involved in the split, because like we've learned from the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, what happens when God makes himself known? Let's just read the rest of 77. They poured forth thick waters, the skies let out a voice, even the arrows went abroad. The sound of your thunder is like a wheel, the lightning illuminated the world, the earth shook and quaked. In the sea was your way. Where'd it come from first? And your paths, plural, in the mighty waters, and your steps were not known. You led your people like sheep by the hand of Moses and Aaron. The water absolutely retreated to the deep, and the fact that they walked upon dry land was yet another miracle, but for another time. When Rabbi Eliezer said, on the day the waters rescinded, what day was this? It was on the third day of their encampment by the sea. The Radal cites a wonderful hint in Isaiah 63. Let's read verse 63:12, but let's read 11 first for context, of course. And his people remembered the days of old. So this is Isaiah 63. And his people remembered the days of old, the days of Moses. Where is he who drew them up from the sea like a shepherd his flock? Where is he who placed within them his Holy Spirit? He led Moses' right, the arm of his glory, splitting the waters before them to make for himself an everlasting name. Molich liyamin Moshe. It says to Moses' right, or to the right of Moses. Zroa tif'arto. Tif'eret is it's a splendor. It's the one in the middle. Okay, that stands for a Torah. But we'll discuss it. So the word to focus on is tif'arto, which, like we said, is splendor. But glory will do just fine, because it translates as glory. He led at the right of Moses the arm of his glory. It's obviously not about the English translation anyway. Tiferet is the third sphira, right? This was the third day of their encampment. The third day, and the third sphira alludes to Tiferet, alluding to splendor. Tiferet is the sephira of Jacob, and his reputation is that of a Torah scholar. Right, and here we're talking about the people of Jacob, or his people Jacob. And so Tiferet is the sign of the written law, which Israel received on the third day at Mount Sinai. And just so you know, Malchut, which is Malchut kingship, is the seventh from the lower seven. Malchut alludes to the oral law because Malchut is in this physical reality. So in order to perform the written law, the oral law, the practical natural nature of Torah practice in this world is Malchut. How does the written law translate? Through the oral law. Okay, we know to do this. How exactly do we do this? This is where the oral law comes in. That's why Malchut and Tiferet are connected. On that very same day, the waters, froze. Now, the word for freezing is kipaon, and that is what is used here in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer and also in Exodus 15:8, which is, of course, a poor translation. So listen in Hebrew. Beruach apecha ne'ermu mayim nitzvu kmo ned nozlim kaf'u, from kipaon, kaf'u teomot belev yam. And with the breath of your nostrils, the waters were heaped up. The running water stood erect like a wall, and the depths, it says, congealed in the heart of the sea. So I Googled the definition of congealed. Congealed, having become semi-solid, especially on cooling. Sort of, but not exactly. If something freezes, it then becomes solid, right? There are walls of ice. In Avot Rabbi Natan, it says the following. Rabbi Eliezer would say the sea depths were arched over from above them, like walking through a tunnel, and the Israelites crossed through so that they would feel no hardship. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon would say the upper waters and the lower waters tossed the Egyptians. As it says in Exodus 14:27, the Eternal tossed the Egyptians into the sea. There is more to say on it, but let's reveal it as our text does. Don't worry, we'll go into all these details. On that very same day, the waters froze and became 12 pathways for the 12 tribes. Targum Yonatan says that the water rose to 300 kilometers in height. That's where the space station is, right? Yeah, so from the ground level, of course, we're talking from the absolute depths of the sea. Nevertheless, it's pretty high up there, right? So I told you, when it comes to these things, do not start stopping suspending your belief right now. You believe the sea split 12 pathways, but you don't believe the water rose to the heavens. You believe the sea split into one pathway, but you don't believe the waters rose to the heavens. You believe the 10 plagues happened, but you don't believe the waters rose to the heavens. You believe the heavens bent and Israel heard the voice of God at Mount Sinai while the entire mountain ascended to heaven, but you don't believe the waters rose to the heavens. I always find it funny when I speak to people who actually know these things, learn these things, every time something new is presented and it's based on what our sages are saying. Again, I did study in order to compile this and put this down here. I'm even giving you the sources. And when I tell people, no. Like, oh, this is hard for you to believe. Moshe holding a big lead casket in his one arm is difficult for you to believe, but you're fine with the sea splitting. Do not forget that, okay? So, maybe, just maybe, not only did the waters of the deep rise as well after the waters of the seas retreated, but maybe, just maybe, the waters of the heavens reunited with the waters of the deep after being separated since creation, if the waters indeed went up that high, or if it seemed that they went up that high. Maybe there was a common ground. Maybe they met along the way. Psalm 77:17, the waters perceived you, O God. These are the heavenly waters. The waters perceived you, waters of the deep. They trembled. Even the deep, even the depths quaked. You see this? Two waters over here in one verse. In other words, yes, the heavenly waters and the earthly waters. And since we know that everything was created in the 6 days of creation and nothing new would be created except for monkeys and elephants, like we discussed at Tower of Babel, okay, go back to that teaching. We need to understand that nothing new was created here. This is just water manipulation. And they became walls of water. And between each pathway there were windows so one could see the other. Our sages give the description of clear glass, as in like you're looking through a clear glass window, but made of water. Not only that, the water, though it was hard as ice, the water turned sweet. So they could reach out and drink along their walk. We'll talk all about this. We also know that all the waters in the world split at the same time, not just the sea. So everything, the waters are, it's like one body, it's one entity, even though there are separate bodies of water, right? Water is ancient. Remember this. This is written in the Pshat, the simple text, Exodus 14:21. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord led the sea with the strong east wind all night, and he made the sea into dry land, and the waters split. You understand? It didn't say, and the sea split. It said the waters split. Vaifku hamayim. Which waters? All the waters. So what we gather, according to the commentary and various midrashim, that the waters covered them like a dome, blocking out the sun, that they could walk through the raging sea, or what was the raging sea. Have you ever seen those underwater tunnels or walkways, right? You go to like an aquarium or something like that. You could see all the marine life swimming around you. They even have hotels in some of these islands, right? Underwater hotels. It's a completely see-through glass room, and you're in there and you're sleeping with the fishes. So think that, except they weren't seeing marine life. Well, not just. When the sea split, it was the very manifestation of the 72-letter name of God. Okay? As we know that this is the name of mercy, and its property is, not surprisingly, water. Mercy in Hebrew, chesed, has the numerical value of 72. Also, when it says God rides on a avkal, av is another word for a cloud, meaning specifically with water. Av is ayin bet. Ayin bet is 72. All this makes sense, and you're going to see it right now. And these 72 names were taken from the following verses. This is how we got the 72-letter name of God. Exodus 14, verses 19, 20, and 21. From these three verses, you get the 72-letter name of God, right? Each verse has 72 letters, and each name has 3 letters. There are many sequences to how to get the right combinations, but the easiest way is if you place one verse on top of the other, right? 1, 2, 3, and go according to each letter according to their order. This is less relevant to the study as, again, these are things we know exist. We can understand the obvious connections, but the meaning, forget about it. You're not going to understand the meaning. I got books about what each name means, but I'm talking about really understanding its properties. We don't know this. We're not supposed to know this. All right, all this we're going to find out shortly when Mashiach comes. So again, these verses are from Exodus 14, 19, 20, and 21, which reads, Then the angel of the Lord, who had been going in front of the Israelite camp, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved away in front of them and stood behind them, and he came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there the camp, and where the cloud and the darkness and it illuminated the night, and one did not draw near to the other all night long. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord led the sea with a strong east wind all night, and he made the sea into dry land, and the waters split. Okay, so according to these, one on top of the other, that's where you get the combinations of the 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 times 72. Okay, so now we could get a little bit more into the miracles that went down. There were 10 miracles done specifically for this grand event. And this is from Avot Rabbi Natan. When our ancestors stood at the sea, Moses said to them, Arise and cross. They said to him, We will not cross until the sea begins to split open. So Moses took his staff and struck the sea, and it began to split open, as it says in Habakkuk 3:14, You will split open the heads of the warriors with your staff. Moses said to them, Arise, cross. They said to him, We will not cross until the sea becomes like a valley before us. So Moses struck the sea, and it became like a valley before them. As it says in Psalm 78:13, he split the sea, and they passed through them, and passed them through. And then in Isaiah 63:14, like a beast going down into the valley. You see, everything they're saying is taken from the Tanakh itself. They're not inventing these things. They see the connections, and here we have it. 3, Moses said to them, Arise, cross. They said, We will not cross until it is divided into sections, as said in Psalms 136:13, who divided the sea of reeds into sections. 4, Moses said to them, Arise and cross. They said, We will not cross until it becomes solid matter. So Moses took his staff and struck the sea, and it became mud. As it said in Habakkuk 3:15, You led your horse into the sea onto solid waters. Moses said to them, arise and cross. They said, we will not cross until it becomes a desert. Okay, so Moses took his staff and struck the sea, and it says, as it says in Psalms 106:9, he led them through the depths as if it were the desert. 6, Moses said to them, arise and cross. They said, we will not cross until it becomes all smashed up into particles. So Moses took his staff and struck the sea, as said in Psalm 74:13, you smashed the sea with your might. 7, Moses said to them, arise and cross. They said, we will not cross until it becomes a bed of rocks. He took his staff and struck the sea, as said over there. Same verse, you broke the heads of crocodiles on the water, and they could not be broken like this except on rocks. 8, Moses said to them, arise and cross. They said, we will not cross until it becomes dry land. So Moses took his staff and struck the sea, as says in Psalm 66:6. He turned the sea into dry land. And in Exodus 14:29, the children of Israel walked on dry land in the midst of the sea. 9, Moses said to them, arise and cross. They said, we will not cross until it becomes walls. So Moses took his staff and struck the sea, as said in Exodus 14:22, and the water became a wall for them, on their right and on their left. Moses said to them, arise and cross. This is 10. Said, arise and cross. They said, we will not cross until goat skins, or nodot, rather, like thermoses, right? To drink from will appear before us. So Moses took his staff and struck the sea, as it says in Exodus 15:8, the walls stood like a stack of ned, of flowing water. And where do we learn that between the sections fire came down, as it said? In other words, in between these sections, fire was coming down, as said in Isaiah 64:1, as fire burns materials that melt, fire causes water to bubble, to make your name known to your adversaries, nations would quake from before you. Okay? And so the goat skins, they would draw oil and honey into the mouths of the babies, who would nurse from them, as said in Deuteronomy 32:13, he nursed him with the honey from the rock. And some say that fresh water flowed from the sea, and they would drink it between the sections of the sea, since seawater is salty, right? For it says flowing nazlu, which always means sweet, as said in Song of Songs 4:15, a well of fresh water flowing from the Lebanon. And the clouds of glory were above them, so that the sun would not oppress them. And this is how the Israelites crossed the water, in order that they would feel no sorrow. And that's from Avot de Rabbi Natan. Interesting, right? Okay. Now try and understand this. We know that water falls, right? Water always comes from the highest place and finds the lowest place, while fire, from wherever it comes from, it always rises. Heat rises, fire rises. These are the properties, the natural properties of these elements, right? Okay. We just read throughout, the water was rising and the fire was falling simultaneously, no less. You see? Who is the master of the universe here? And they saw the Holy One, blessed be he, walk before them. They saw everything turn on its head. Nothing made logical sense anymore. Nature was going haywire. Everything was fused together, and yet there was perfect order. So as chaotic as it wasn't chaotic at all. Everything was in perfect order. Not a grain of sand, a drop of water, a gust of wind, not a stone, rock, or a pebble was out of place. It wasn't just, everything was made perfect. That's how they knew the Holy One, blessed be he, walked before them. Not because they saw his image, because he has no image, as we have read time and again, but through his deeds he made himself known. As our text continues and says, and his footprint they did not see, and they were not known. Now, I know this, you know this, right? Someone should probably tell the Edomites, as they are convinced that they are the only ones who think that they can see the image of their God. And even David knows this. As said in Psalm 68:25, they saw your ways, Elohim, the ways of my God, my King in sanctity. To see the ways of God, derech Hashem, does not mean that you see God. in the very simple sense. And then again, he says it in 77:20. In the sea was your way known, and your paths in the mighty waters, and your steps, your footprints, were not known. I asked myself, why was it the water, right, that God chose to make his ways known during the greatest event since creation? Why water? To quote another grand master in his own right, empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. If you put water into a cup, that's right, I know you're smiling, it becomes a cup. If you put it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. That was Bruce Lee, if y'all didn't know, okay? And so, my friends, the bottom line is this. Just like the children of Israel had no clue how their salvation would come about, neither do we. We know that God is going to send his Redeemer, just like they did, and God is going to destroy our enemies and save us, just like he did them. We know this because we read it from the beginning of our writings to the end, and over the last 2,000 years. So we know this is coming. But do you think that the thought even crossed their mind that the sea would split, right? Think about this. They were led to the sea. They're like, well, I guess this is it, right? Not for a moment did they think about this, because who would possibly think that? Us reading this after the fact, you know it's coming, but they didn't. So again, you just saw all this happen. You saw all the miracles that God performed in Egypt, but it would still never occur to you that God would not only split the sea, but like all the ways we just read. How? No, it doesn't even enter our reality. This is how things are going to come about for us. Okay, so like I said, we take this for granted because we know the story. But not only did God split the sea, but he did so in style, incorporating all the wonders we just read about. And so too will it be with us. For the last redemption will mirror the first, only be infinitely more glorious. Just like Israel were staring at the raging sea, saying, "This must be our end." And God said, "No, this is the beginning." Israel said, "This is how we die." And God said, "No, my children, this is how you live." God is formless, shapeless, and yet he fills up any and all spaces. Water can perfectly fill or engulf any object or space. It can even become them. It can be warm or cool, boiling hot or freezing cold. It can be solid or liquid, still or flowing, vapor. It inhabits life within it, in all the water and all the seas, and it sustains life to all creation above it. If you live according to God's commands, you will flow. If you don't, you will crash. And such are the ways of God. Such is the way of water. And that's our class for today. I do hope you enjoyed it. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.